Just your impression, sir, of the theme for this forum of excessive regulation, and your impressions of how organizations like CIFA can help both governments and other regulatory actors help do their job, but also kind of not impede.
Well, I think CIFA is playing a very important role on an issue which is equally important to the development of the global economy. Small businesses, the so-called SMEs, are the drivers of employment throughout the world. They represent the vast bulk of companies and the bulk of hiring. When regulation, however well-intentioned, becomes excessive, when the burden is disproportionate to small companies, inevitably it has an impact on their growth, on employment, and of course on economic growth overall. So I think what we have to achieve is a balance. I've had experience as a finance minister, as a regulator, and as a self-regulator, and I've never had experience on the other side, having been the subject of an enforcement action, even though I was also an investment banker for many years. So I'm not coming from the perspective of someone who is embittered by having been charged for impropriety. But I can tell you, having been in the other side of it, that occasionally the rules are there to protect the regulator as much as they are to protect the public. And what we need is a balance. We need a regulation that will ensure market integrity, that will protect investors. There should be no compromise in that regard. But we don't need to go any farther. And sometimes rules are excessive, they're difficult to understand, they're applied in a mechanistic way. And I think we've got to step back and understand what the social and economic cost of doing that. That does not imply a compromise on truth, on integrity, or a willingness and indeed an obligation to pursue fraudulent or unethical behavior. But it does mean we have to let companies breathe.
Right. And is there an example in terms of one of the focuses of a later forum is entrepreneurship, that small entrepreneur, the startup company, the one or two people. Is there a way that these new regulation paradigms can be enforced, but without maybe such an equal heavy-handedness? A large corporation might be able to handle regulation better than a one or two person enterprise.
Well, absolutely. I think the complaint from the SMEs is that first they didn't cause the financial crisis, and yet disproportionately they're having to pay for it because the larger companies, while they're bearing costs as well, are better able to absorb them, both because they have more capital and they have an infrastructure that allows them to interface with the regulatory community. Smaller companies don't have that opportunity, and so sometimes there can be an excessive amount and an inflexibility regarding regulation, and I think regulators should step back and look at that issue. I know in Canada there are a number of attempts to deal with that. The Ontario Securities Commission has a special program to deal with it. At the Canadian government level, we've addressed the issue of red tape, and we instituted a rule, which I hope won't be overturned by the subsequent government, which says that if you want to introduce one new regulation, you've got to get rid of another one. Now that may seem a little bit mechanistic, but no one could deny that there are thousands of regulations that maybe have outlived their public policy objective, if they ever had one.